morning.
Good morning.
All right, so good morning, everybody, and thank you all for being here. Just wanted to try a different format for discussing the monthly crime numbers. So I think this way gives us more time to have a frank conversation, and also allows us to allows me to bring up the people on the front lines of the crime fight. And those are Chief of Patrol Fred Waller, Chief of Detectives Melissa Staples, and of course, First Deputy Superintendent Anthony Riccio. For the first 6 months of this year, we're continuing to make progress in reducing overall crime. Now, I'm certainly not satisfied with where we are in terms of crime reductions, but we have to admit that there has been progress being made, and the credit goes to the people in the neighborhoods that work with CPD every day, and certainly to the men and women of the Chicago Police Department who go out there every day and fight for the residents of this city. Now, although we're making progress, we still need to do much more to create a culture of accountability for gun offenders and have repercussions for engaging in senseless violence. This weekend is a prime example of that. We all need to step up our efforts to change the culture of wanting to carry and use guns in Chicago. Getting arrested simply doesn't do that, because we're seeing more than 60% of the people we arrest on felony gun possession during weekends like this are being released on low-level bonds by our court system. And what this means is it nearly takes longer to do the arrest paperwork than it does for defendants to be held in pretrial detention. Now, please don't misunderstand my comments regarding this. I do not mean that I don't support bail bond, because I do, but bail amounts have to be a mechanism of accountability, especially when we're talking about crimes that could lead to the taking of another person's life. Now I want to shift gears and talk about some of the things that are coming our way in terms of public safety investments. Last week, I had the honor of addressing all 93 United States attorneys in Washington, D.C., and we spoke about solutions and strategies for the federal government to assist local jurisdictions in fighting gun violence. Now, I can tell you that Attorney General Barr is extremely passionate about continuing investments in local police departments and giving the Office of the United States Attorney General as much resources as possible to combat gun crime, especially in cities like Chicago. And we have one of the strongest U.S. attorneys in the country, and really a formidable partner in fighting crime, and that's in U.S. Attorney John Lausch. Now, I'm excited to announce that we will be unveiling a new initiative to analyze and monitor individuals that commit gun crimes in Chicago. This new collaboration meeting, which we are calling GunStat, will involve the Chicago Police Department, Mayor Lightfoot, the United States Attorney's Office, Cook County State's Attorney's Office, and Parole and Probation. The purpose of the meeting will be to take a closer look at those individuals who are engaging in gun violence and looking at the entire spectrum of the criminal justice system to see how prudent their arrest, prosecution, sentencing, and ultimately community supervision process is working in the city of Chicago. I'm also very excited to announce that we're trying to raise funding to continue the expansion of the Detective Area Tech Centers, or ATCs, which combines state-of-the-art technology to access video and cell phones so that detectives can more quickly solve crimes. We'll also be expanding the 2 final strategic decision support centers in the 1st District and the 16th Districts. This is a priority for Mayor Lightfoot, as the model is directly attributed to helping us reduce murders and shootings consecutively since 2016. Now, before I close, I want to remind everyone that the reward amount for the senseless shooting of our off-duty police officer is $20,000. Detectives are making great progress, and I'll ask Chief Staples to give us a quick update on his condition and where the investigation is.
The officer shot is not out of the dark yet, but we're all praying for a full recovery. We're asking everyone to keep the officer in our thoughts and prayers. We're making great progress on the case. We've identified the vehicle involved in this incident. We're asking anybody out there that has any information on this senseless shooting of a police officer to reach out via email at cpdtip.com or contact the Area Central Detective Division at 312-747-8380. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll take any questions.
Are there any, can you say anything about
look like he's planning to make a full recovery? What kind of recovery, what is he looking at?
I can't comment on that, sorry.
Superintendent, can you talk a little bit more about this GunStat initiative? Is that just like the equivalent of more sex offender monitoring, and knowing where they are at what point in time, and following up with them and making sure they check in, or what does it enhance?
So,
what does it look like?
As you all know, myself and First Deputy Chiefs, we go all around the country looking at best practices and what has worked in other jurisdictions. And one of the times I was out in the Baltimore, DC area, I found out that they had a program like that. And at that time, I believe former Deputy U.S. Attorney Rob Rosenstein was heading that, and it was very successful. So ultimately what it means is that from the time of arrest for a person that's charged with a gun offense, we'll monitor that particular case all the way until the end of it, where they get whatever consequence they have, whether it be jail time, community service, whatever that is. We'll monitor it with Chicago Police Department, U.S. Attorney's Office, State's Attorney's Office, parole and probation, as well as the mayor's office. So we'll monitor that individual from beginning to end to see what consequence and how effective that consequence is for that particular individual.
And how does that differ from what's being done now?
These guys aren't being tracked like that right now, you know, from the time that they're arrested until the end of it. We simply haven't done that before. So I think this will give us a better picture, a better idea of how effective we're doing in terms of holding people accountable for gun offenses.
Will you be looking at, say, Joe Schmo on, like, you want to know where he is on a Tuesday afternoon? You know, is it that kind of specific, or?
No, it's not that in depth. What we want to see is from the time they're arrested, what happens with the court cases, the prosecution, and then ultimately what's the final outcome of that case. And basically we're focusing on like the top 10 worst of the worst in our different districts around the city.
Can you also elaborate on the cell phone video access that you were talking about?
So, you know, oftentimes because different carriers use different types of technology for their video, we're not able to access that video in a timely fashion. It takes quite a while. But once we invested that money, CPD didn't have the access to do it, us in particular. So now with the ATCs in the detective divisions, they have all types of state-of-the-art technology now to be able to access those videos where we didn't have that capability before.
Speaking of the detective division, what is the clearance rate for homicides these days?
Chief Staples?
The clearance rate as of this morning is 51%. 2.5, 3 years ago, when I became chief, it was 33%. So to date, we are up approximately 19% over where we were a few years ago. I think it's great progress, and I think we'll continue to increase our clearance rate as the year progresses.
And the clearance rate, just let me be clear, we're not satisfied with where it is, but you know, you often hear me refer to a clearance rate as just not CPD's clearance rate, but the city of Chicago's clearance rate. And I say that because it takes all of us as a city to improve this clearance rate. So it takes Chicago Police Department, of course, we can and will do better with our investigations, the prosecution of these cases, but more importantly, you know, people ask me all the time about video. And the answer is, we're not going to always have videos of these incidents. That's just impossible. You know, so we rely on people out in the communities to give us information. And we see when that happens, and we do have the additional evidence, we see what the outcomes usually are. You know, the state's attorney's office is able to bring the prosecution to a conclusion, and we get convictions on these crimes. So it takes us to build better relationships out in the communities that we serve, because ultimately that's who we work for.
So for the GunStat and the cell phone stuff, was this coming out of that meeting you just went to, or is this just new things that?
No, this is new stuff that was already in the pipeline.
Okay.
But you know, the meeting that I had with the U.S. attorneys, there were 10 major cities, you know, New York, LA, Chicago, Baltimore, Miami, Philadelphia, Dallas, and I apologize if I left someone out, but there were 10 major cities, the police chiefs, along with their state's attorneys. So we all attended that meeting to come up with solutions on how we can do better overall in terms of fighting crime.
Superintendent Johnson, looking ahead to the 4th of July, can you talk about police plans for the 4th of July to keep crowds at maybe Navy Pier safe and around the city?
Yeah, well, we'll have a more formalized press conference about what we're actually going to do, where we're going into more detail. But what I can tell you right now, you know, we know we have some historical locations that we've had problems in before, so of course we'll focus on those areas. But the downtown locations, of course, you'll see a lot more presence, uniform presence. But at the same time, we'll have a lot of undercovers in those areas also. But you'll see a larger police presence than you normally see on weekends. And again, you know, I would encourage everyone, you know, anywhere in the city, enjoy yourselves, celebrate responsibly. But at the end of the day, whether it's downtown, Navy Pier, or out in the outlying neighborhoods, if you misbehave and you commit criminal activities, you're going to be held accountable by the Chicago Police Department.
These latest numbers came out overnight, and we had a really violent weekend here, just over 50 people shot. Can you just respond to this? I mean, it's just a stark contrast. I know we're talking about numbers being down, but this was pretty bad.
Now, you see, last weekend, the numbers, you know, let me be clear on something. When we talk about crime in the city, we shuffle around these numbers, but we have to remember these are people that we're actually talking about. You know, so it's never acceptable to us. Last weekend, we had half of what we had this weekend, but it just goes to show you how we have to do a better job of holding people accountable. You know, and so I'm glad you asked me that. So let me clarify something for a moment. When I say, you know, don't misconstrue what I'm saying when I talk about bond system. I'm not blaming the court system or the judges for anything. The people that should be blamed are the people pulling the triggers. That's who's causing the crime. What I am saying is this. When we arrest someone and they go through the court system, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have a cash bond. What I'm saying is that that bond has to be enough to create that culture of accountability that says to that person, today I'm not going to take this gun out of the house. Because people misconstrue what's going on. Most people think these gun offenders make the decision to fire their gun at the moment when they're in that incident. That's not when they make that decision. They make that decision when they leave home that morning and decide to take their gun with them. Because what they're saying is, if I need to use this today, I am. You can't pull the trigger if you don't have the gun with you, right? That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so what I'm saying is that we need help with holding them accountable. There's a difference between you making that decision. If you say, well, if CPD catches me with this gun today, I have to pay $100 bond to get out. That's easy. Now, if you're saying, you know, I have to come up with $4,000 or $5,000, then that might make you think twice. So all I'm simply saying is that we have to do a better job of creating that mental culture of accountability where people will decide not to take the gun out with them.
Superintendent, just a little more specifics, and you kind of just addressed it a little bit there. What bond would tip that scale? I mean, if you were to ask for anything you wanted there and they were going to say, sure, we'll do that. Is it $4,000?
I say
What is it?
$100,000. No,
What is it?
I'm just kidding. But, you know, I don't know where that sweet spot is. We'd have to look at how effective that is in holding people accountable. So I would say $100 is obviously not enough. But I would say if we get it into the thousands, $4,000 or $5,000, for them to have to come up with every time they get caught, they think twice. Because I know I don't have $4,000 in my pocket every day. That's just not going to happen. So I just want to see more accountability. You know, if we're letting 60% of these individuals go on a norm, that's too many. You know, and that's just not creating that accountability that we need to see. And I would say this to you: I'm not editorializing our bond system. I'm just simply presenting the data to you. And we'll let the people of Chicago decide what they think is a fair amount to keep our streets safe.
Is that a question that could be answered by GunStat over the course of your study?
It could be, you know, we'll certainly research a lot of different avenues to see what's being most effective. But like I said, you know, ultimately we work for the citizens of this city as well as the elected officials. So I think that we should let the people of this city decide where we want to be in terms of that issue, you know, because like I said, I don't, you know, you all heard me say from the time I became superintendent, I don't believe in mass incarceration. I don't believe in subjecting poor people to different rules. But what I do believe in is keeping guns off the streets of our city. And I do believe in holding individuals accountable. You know, every Monday, or every day for that matter, the people up here with me, we're held accountable for the crime in this city. The mayor's office is held accountable for the crime in this city. The elected officials are held accountable for the crime in this city. So why shouldn't the people pulling triggers be held accountable? The answer is they should. You know, the people of this city deserve that. And the fact that we have so many guns out here and so many individuals willing to use them lets us know that we need to do a better job of creating that mental culture of accountability. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.